for the world and for me and all of you out there. I'm so excited. Say hello to Roman. Hello, Roman.
Todd, how are you, brother? Great to be with you.
Yeah, let's get it on like Donkey Kong.
Preview. Todd is not only a remarkable, successful 30-year titan in business with having multiple businesses that generate multiplied millions of dollars.
And if that plan happens to be to build $1 million company, which I can help you do.
But he's humble. He's a man of God. He's a family man.
The world's news organizations are built on everything but positivity.
He is an influential entrepreneur and business speaker for over 30 years.
I've got to forecast. I've got to pronounce. I've got to project. I've got to share with you my ideas, my vision, my goals for not only myself, but for you.
That's why he's came up with his incredible concept of taking and creating a platform for people that are wired differently.
And you got to understand that your habits of your person and your habits of your business and your habits of your spirituality have to lead to the North Star of who you are. We need to figure out who we want to be in life.
Oh, I love it. It's Friday. Good morning, everybody. And I have got an amazing guest on the show this morning for our Friday podcast interview. And I'm going to just get him out here any little bit. I can see him in the green room. He's smiling. He's looking at me. He's like, oh, man, get me on. This guy I met February of this year at the Super Bowl, and he just shook my world, man. He put me in. He put me involved. He got me involved with the NFL players. He got me on stage. He got me a lot of things, and we were out there. We had a great time. We got to talk about our fathers. We got to talk about our legacy. We got to talk about just a lot of really cool things. I think you're going to have amazing insight when you get to meet this, what I would call my intellectual warrior friend, my intellectual superhero, Roman Gabriel III. But let's do some homework real quick because this week has been amazing, and I just want to catch you up and let you know what I've got going on right now. So I just want to keep you. We had a great podcast this week with my good friend Mike DiCoccio. He's an amazing man. Remember that, and I want to remind you that November 13th, I'm going to be at Tampa with Sebastian Gorka, Dennis Prager, Mike Gallagher, and we're going to have a great time. Countdown to the election. We got to get it on. We got to get her done. I've got to let it rip potato chip. Thank you, Sebastian Gorka, for the podcast we had. You can get to Spotify or iTunes or any of those places and hear that interview. It is amazing. And don't forget that I'm going to be November 14th, I'm going to be at the Great American Cigar Tour with Sebastian Gorka again in the Corona Cigar Place. It's awesome. We're going to have the cigars. We're going to have a good time. We're going to talk about God. We're going to talk about politics. Where are we at? And I'm going to be signing Your Will Be Done books both in Tampa and at this event. And then I want to let you know, weekend's up on us right now, and Larry Elder will be on this show Monday. Can we believe it? I can't believe I got Roman Gabriel and Larry Elder back to back. But don't forget, as we bring it into the end of November, the Tiki Hut Retreat is happening. It's happening November 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th. I will be teaching you 4 days on unconventional brilliance, how to grow you personally, spiritually, and profitably. Without further ado, we got to have my friend Roman Gabriel. This is November 3rd, and he is live, and he has a sexy barber also. So everybody, please welcome my friend Roman Gabriel. How you doing, Roman? Let's see, I got something for you. Let's bring him in.
Brother, how are you? Great to be with you this morning.
Look, can you hear the crowd?
Yeah, I do. The crowd sounds awesome, man. I love crowds, especially when you're wired differently like you are, man. This is exciting. It's great to be with you today, and congratulations on all your success.
Well,
sounds like it's going to be an exciting month on Wired Differently. Wired Differently is exciting to me, so I'm really excited to be with you.
You're new to this whole craziness, man, and I remember meeting you, and I got to just tell the audience, so like. I got to confess. I'm going to confess something to you. And I know, you have a prolific father. I still have my father also. He's the same age as your dad, a prolific father. And he set all these world records and was an amazing football coach. I'm making a movie about him. I think you know a little bit about that. But I watched your father growing up playing football, and I was like, man, Roman Gabriel, oh my gosh, woo. What, like, that's the guy. I mean, if you ever get time, look up his father, Roman Gabriel II, right? But so when I went out to the Super Bowl, I'm sorry, but I thought I was going to see your father. Did I ever tell you that?
You did.
I did. I was looking around, and I'm like, and then I wasn't sure if he was even alive anymore, and it was really awkward. But you were great. You pulled me over and you put me in with all those NFL players, and you said, "Go coach those kids over there."
We had a great time.
We
The
did.
Super Bowl is a special place to meet a lot of fun people and a lot of people who are wired differently and have a mission in life and who are excited about making a difference. So that's my wife and I have been married for 30 years, and our mission has been exactly what you talk about, being wired differently, having a platform that's not about yourself. It's about making a difference in other people's lives. And that's what we've been committed to. And right now we live in a country that's lost its way. And with that has come a very confused next generation of young people. And we're doing everything we can to keep those young people on track and help them to understand that there is a way to success, and that requires hard work, perseverance, trust in God, and reliance on other people in your life to help you get where you're going. And we both wouldn't be on the show today if it hadn't been people like that.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to take the viewers through kind of an organizational org chart here. We're basically what's going to happen is we're going to actually tie in your spiritual growth, personal growth, and profitable growth somehow throughout this show. But more importantly, we're going to glean some wisdom from Roman Gabriel III, an amazing, amazing man. And so what I do with this show is I want you to understand, I'm going to take you through basically your story, and then we're going to kind of hit on the business side. And then we're going to close with really sold out in the fentanyl crisis. And I want you to educate this world, these people on here on fentanyl, and then why I'm calling you my intellectual superhero. One is because you're a sophisticated thinking man. You're a spirit driven man, but intellectually, I don't know that I've ever met anybody more superior in their craft, in the purpose of their craft than you. You're going to be amazed when he starts talking, because you're going to want to take notes. You're going to want to understand. So we're going to learn some things. So let's set the world up. I am going to show a video right now. And then I'm going to ask you, when you come off the video, why are you wired differently? And then you're going to give us a little bit about growing up in the days with your father. You ready for the video? You don't know what I'm going to show. You don't know what I'm going to show, do you?
I don't.
Tell everybody this is not a stage show. Like, you had to get up and you had to click go, and this is live. Tell everybody.
This is like two-a-days in football, man.
This is
somebody was hitting the trash cans downstairs in my bedroom. So last night I had to get ready. Had to be ready, prepared, kind of like game day.
You don't do live shows, only here in Wired Different. Here we go. You ready? This is Blast from the Past. Here we go. Ready? I'm adding it. Here we go. Boom.
On first down, Gabriel can't find anybody open, breaks up the middle and goes for 14 yards. Gabriel can't find anybody open, breaks up the middle and goes for 14 yards.
So, you know who that guy is?
I do know who that guy is. That guy was the reason why I wanted to be a professional football player, was watching him do his thing, and growing up as a kid, really following my dad, wanting to be a professional quarterback since I was about 6 or 7 years old. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and my dad had a big influence in my life in teaching me, what it takes to be successful. And though he wasn't perfect, he was an incredible teacher of the skills that it took to play the game mentally and physically. And he prepared me and showed me, what you have to do to be the best. Right. And when I say that to people out there, not everybody can be the best when it comes to results, but putting yourself in a position to be the best. Mm-hmm. And that day-to-day thing that we've kind of lost in this country, which is that anything worthwhile takes time. Anything worthwhile requires perseverance, and anything worthwhile understanding where your gifts and abilities come from. And I was fortunate to have a mom who instilled in me Christian values and faith when I was a very young man. My faith story is an exciting one. For me, being a Christian was something that was I can tell you the day, I can tell you how it changed my life, and I can tell you that what I thought was my mission in life, football, really was just a way to get where God wanted me to be. And every day till this day, I thank God for each and every trial, each and every victory, each and every opportunity that He has brought into my life to prepare me for this moment.
Well, let me set this up a little bit, because Roman, you're touching on the things that I really want to dig into your life a little bit on a personal level, and then I really want to get to how we're gonna save this epidemic-ridden world in one regard, or the best we can, one fentanyl pill at a time, if that's what it takes, right? So here's where we're at. Roman Gabriel II was a prolific quarterback in 1962 to 70 something, right? He played
77.
70
years.
Yeah, 11 years with the Rams, and then I think 5 years with the Philadelphia Eagles. And Roman, as a little boy like me, was following his father around, and he was running into Dick Butkus and Joe Namath, and like when quarterbacks had to play like that video you saw. And so the reason I set that up is because I can't help what surges through my body when I see 1970 and I hear the sounds. I see the video of 1970, and I see a flashback video of someone I looked up to even as a kid playing the game. This man was 6'3", 6'4", depending on what article you're reading, 235 pounds, depending on what season he's in. He threw the balls, man, just 90 yards. He ran over people. He was an Adonis, right? He made movies. He did TV. He was on talk shows. I mean, this guy was the American dream. And I don't know how much money he made at, probably not a lot, because that's what it wasn't making a lot of money back then. But I want you to hear this. I want you to understand that Roman Gabriel III, this man right here, lived through all that, just like me, with my father and his fame and the little things that he was doing. And we put our fathers at pedestals, and we walk around, and then at some point we realized that maybe they're really not the gods in our life. I mean, at some point, I don't know when that is for any one of us, but I know that in my life, I had my father on such a pedestal that there wasn't anything I could see above him. But at some point in my life, I realized later on in life, as I got older, there's more to life. There is a bigger deity than our fathers. But when you see a man like Roman Gabriel II rule the space, it's got to affect you, Roman. And I want to know your story. One, why are you wired differently? How did that affect you? And two, I want to hear this piece, because my father wasn't a believer, right? And so I had to literally cross that cavern of, basically choosing one father over another in many regards. And I just want you to speak to that a little bit in your life, and bless us with your story.
Well, when I was growing up, my dad got drafted by the Rams in the number 1 draft pick that year in 1962. I was 2 years old.
By the NFL. Now the AFL
right.
also drafted him by
the Raiders, number 1 in the AFL as well in 1966. So,
that's right.
I really didn't know much about anything, being born in North Carolina, but spending so little time when my dad got drafted and we moved to California. That's really more where I grew up, my hometown, and have great memories of California at that time. So I really didn't know much different. I mean, most NFL players, the average player today plays 2.6 or 2.7 years, which that's surprising to a lot of people, because you always see, the NFL promotes superstars and guys that play for a long, long time, but that's really the anomaly in the NFL. So when people asked me when I was a kid playing my first football, when I was playing flag football when I was like 6 years old, and they asked me what I wanted to do, I said I want to be a professional football quarterback. And people laughed at me, because it's like, hey, your dad's like a superstar in the NFL. I mean, him and Joe Namath were like the 2 biggest names in the National Football League, and my dad came from a little small town as I did in Wilmington, North Carolina, and just in the blink of an eye, he was a superstar and the toast of the town in the big town of Los Angeles. So it was a shock for him, just like it was for our family. And if you ever, all of us out there can remember thinking that you're prepared for success and you're prepared for fame and you're prepared for accolades, but that's just not true in real life. So for my dad, it was a very difficult transition personally. People couldn't see that, but it's kind of like, I guess for a lot of people, like Michael Jordan, where people, are constantly watching you, constantly telling you how great you are, constantly telling you about, what a superstar, and how you're wired differently, like you said. But for me, I had a really interesting childhood because back in the day, my two brothers and I was the oldest of three. My dad was gone a lot. He left early in the morning, which NFL players do because it's a full-time job, just like any other dad. And so I didn't see him a lot during the season. And of course, training camp back then, my dad would leave for 6 weeks. And they would be gone and the only time that I would see them would be Sunday afternoon when they had, part of the day off or after the game was over.
Right.
So for my brothers and I, it was kind of a curse because on one hand, everybody's, always telling you how lucky you are, telling you how great, must be incredible being the son of Roman Gabriel. And it was in many ways because I love the whole, part of his football life in terms of watching that, in terms of, back then there wasn't free agency in the NFL. So I had another 48 dads that didn't go anywhere that were with the Rams, the Merlin Olsons and the Deacon Joneses and the Jack Snows, who were like second fathers to me during that time. So, my dad did football camps like we do all the time, all over the country. So my younger brother and I would go to these football camps where we stayed in dormitories for a week. And I didn't even want to be a quarterback. I wanted to be Jack Snow, who was a wide receiver for the Rams and who I really looked up to. But, when you're a kid, like you said, you look at that and you say, wow, my life's really good. But what you don't realize is a lot of the things that you're missing out on. And that kind of came to fruition, when I was about 9 years old. And fortunately, I begged my father and my mom to allow me to play tackle football when I was 8 years old, which was the first year that I played tackle football in Long Beach, California. And that was really the turning point in my life. Because our coach was our pastor of our church. He was a godly man. He could throw the fire and brimstone down, which pastors did back then, kind of like Jesus talked a lot about, you better know where you're going. Do you want to go to heaven or do you want to go to hell? And back then it was pretty straightforward. And of course, Jesus talked about two things, about money a lot and a lot about hell. So this coach came to me and my teammates after practice and said, listen, I want to take you guys on a field trip this coming Saturday night. And it's going to be at Anaheim Stadium, the home of the California Angels. And of course, I was a big baseball fan, growing up in California, and both the Angels and the Dodgers. And my brother and I collected baseball cards, and we were fans of all sports, and we played all sports. So we asked him, so I guess we're going to an Angels baseball game. He said, no. I said, are we going to a concert? And he said, no. He said, we're going to go see a new pastor that's speaking across the world. His name's Billy Graham.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And none of us, at the time knew who Billy Graham was.
Time out.
And at that time, he was about 32.
Hang on here. Does anybody else have goosebumps right now? I mean, you cannot be listening to this and not be moved. I want you to take that in right now. Thank you, Roman. Thank you, Roman.
Well, we at the time, we really thought of it as nothing other than a bunch of teammates getting together and our pastor coach taking us to an event. But it was the start of God getting hold of me and changing my life. When we walked into the stadium, it was the first time that I'd been to Angel Stadium that wasn't a baseball game. And unfortunately, the California Angels weren't very good. So when you went to Angels games, there might be, 15 or 20,000 in this stadium with 55 or 60,000 people. But when we walked into the stadium that night, it was full.
Wow.
And I still to this day go back and watch the video because it was televised. And if you grew up watching Billy Graham on television, like many of our parents and grandparents did, that was the way that you learned about God. And so I had been to a Baptist church with my pastor. I had heard the gospel, but for me, it had never hit home until I saw Pastor Graham. And when he got up and began to speak with authority and began to talk about the kingdom of God and began to talk about what is a Christian, my ears were glued, as my friends were that night. I heard the message for the first time that a Christian isn't someone who goes to church or someone who reads the Bible, and you can't be a Christian just because your parents are Christians. That being a Christian is making a decision to not only believe that Jesus died on the cross for our sins, but that he rose from the dead and that he is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And he challenged each and every person in that room, and it looked a lot like heaven that night, black and white and Hispanic, men and women and young people all over the place. And he was wearing a coat and tie, and he had a choir out there that sang Christian music before it started. And he got heavy into this message. And as you know about Billy Graham, he always told biblical stories that tied in with the kingdom of God and tied in with his main mission. And that's what, wired him differently, which is his goal that night was to offer each and every person in that stadium a personal invitation to know Jesus as their personal Savior and Lord. And so when he asked everybody at the end, do you know Jesus and would you like to know him? And I'm going to invite you to get up out of your seat and to walk down the aisles and to come down here. And if you made a decision for Jesus, I want you to come down and come down now. I don't want you to be afraid. I want you to join every other person. And it was like being at a giant waterfall and seeing a waterfall of people come out of their seats and fill up the entire diamond. Well, I looked at my friends. I didn't get saved that night, but I knew that night that my life had changed because for the first time I had been challenged with the fact that I needed to make a decision one way or another.
Right.
Who Jesus was in my own life.
Right.
Not my parents' life, not my pastor's life, but me as a person individually, as though there was no one else there. What are you going to do with Jesus? And so being a 9-year-old that had never been on a professional football or baseball field like that before, me and a couple of my buddies ran down the aisle and went down on the field, and it was very exciting because when you're 9, you're pretty pumped up that you're on this professional baseball diamond. And so we were standing, and Pastor Graham was standing on a podium. I can remember it like it was yesterday. And he began to talk about what it is to be a Christian, and once you make that decision to know Jesus, what do you do?
Yeah.
And he started talking about the importance of being around other Christians, having a church that believed that Jesus died on the cross, rose from the dead, and that he is alive and well and King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And then he talked about having a Bible and reading your Bible each day. And he talked about the importance of prayer, the foundational things of what a Christian is and how it's a daily walk and how this is the beginning, not the end of a walk towards eternity. And I was so blown away that night because it's almost like, many of you out there that had your spiritual experience. Many people talk about their spiritual experience. They talk about a light coming on. I was in darkness. I was living a life where, football was everything to me. And unfortunately, that was my father's, view of the world, was that you have to give everything you have towards that career and towards what you've committed to, which was very admirable in terms of on its own. But it's one of the reasons why, my father struggled in his personal life, because all of the fame and fortune that came his way so quickly was like any other famous person. If you're not grounded and prepared, and when I say grounded and prepared, if God isn't first in your life, then something else is going to be. Right. And he was by far the best football player out there. And,
in the planet, man, in the planet.
Yeah. And so I remember going home from that event and thinking about the things that Pastor Graham had said that night. And I went back to my life, and, life was a lot different growing up in the 60s. One of the most important things that you did every night is your mom and dad. There were no distractions. There were no answering machines. There were no mobile phones. You all sat down around the table and had dinner. Mm-hmm. And you talked about your day, and you talked about family. And that was an anchor for me. And it was kind of a misnomer, because I kind of thought that this is the way life's going to be the rest of the way. And I can always trust that this group of people sitting around the table, I can count on. Mm-hmm. And I kind of put my trust in family, which there's nothing wrong with that. But a short time later, my dad hit the zenith of his career in 1969 when I was 9 years old. He was the most valuable player in the NFL. The team won their first 11 out of 14 games. Everybody thought that the Rams were headed for the Super Bowl. My dad and the coach of the Rams, George Allen, had turned around the Rams from a losing franchise to one of the winningest franchises in the 60s. And unfortunately, though, my dad was great, and the Rams were great when another team was great, and that was the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers were the gold standard of the NFL. So unfortunately, not like the NFL today, where you have all these wild cards. You had to win your division. So if you played 14 games and you didn't win 11 games, you had very little chance of going to the playoffs. So there were many years that my dad didn't even get to the playoffs, and they were one of the best teams in the NFL. Right. And they happened to be in the same division as the Baltimore Colts with Johnny Unitas, and the Green Bay Packers with Bart Starr. So his first important playoff experience in 67, they lost to the world champion Packers, which is no shame in that. But they beat them in the regular season, but had to go to Green Bay. And obviously, when you went to Green Bay, it's very difficult to beat the Packers. So,
Roman, can I interrupt here a little bit? Because I don't want to lose the path that I really feel like you're certainly blessing me with, because I'm 58. You're 55. What are you, 55? Something like that?
I'm 63.
63. Okay, 58, 63. So I think that we lived in a similar era, and we're looking at the same things. But the thing that I really, really want to hone in with you right now is this relationship with your father. Maybe it's just me and you talking here, because I really had to move almost not away from my father, but I had to literally say, okay, you are my father. But when I had my Christian experience, or my moment with God, I had a hard time, reconciling that with this lofty figure that, obviously.
See, I didn't have a choice. So in 1969, my dad was in the playoffs. He was the MVP. Everybody thought they were going to the Super Bowl. And, I watched that game on television against the Minnesota Vikings, who were undefeated at the time, and they lost a brutal close game that ended their season in Minneapolis. And I'll never forget the disappointment. My mom had all of the wives of the team over that day, and it was like a morgue at our house. I mean, everybody thought that the Rams were going to be in the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs, but it wasn't to be. And after that game was over, my dad didn't come home. My three brothers and I, for almost 3 days, my dad didn't come back from that trip. And when you're 9 years old, your brother's 8 and your other brother's 1, and you're asking your mom where your dad is and she can't tell you, that was a big shock. And so 3 days later, my dad showed up at home and slept for about, I don't know, it seemed like a day. And as soon as he got up, he pulled my brothers and I aside and he said, "Listen, I'm leaving. I love your mom, but it isn't working out. I love you guys. It's not about you, but I've got to go." So my dad left all of us that day. And that was the biggest shock of my life. It was like having your heart ripped out. It was devastating for my mom and for my brothers and I became my family's father at that time.
God bless you, brother.
Being the oldest in the house, I had 2 brothers that really struggled with it. So for the next couple of years, I threw myself into sports and football because it was the only place that I felt comfortable. I was a very shy kid growing up. Only felt comfortable on a baseball diamond or basketball court or football where I could, focus on, what I had a passion for doing, was good at doing, and could forget about the pain. So I carried around a lot of shame. My brothers and we carried around a lot of guilt. We carried around a lot of shock during that time. Really watched our mom struggle. Because you can imagine, one day you're part of, and again, back then it was more of the wives were a big deal because all the players were together. They weren't going anywhere. There was no free agency.
They're not moving around. No.
So suddenly all of your friends who my mom had, everybody makes choices.
Right.
And most people moved on with my dad. The good news is that God was shaking my world and was showing me that even though what you thought the anchor of your life is over, I have a plan for you. But it was very dark for 2 or 3 years. So when I was 13, we moved to a small town north of Los Angeles, and we moved a lot when I was growing up. So I didn't get a chance to make very good friends a lot because I'd be at a school for 1 or 2 years and then be moving. So my mom knew that I needed an anchor. She knew I needed something more. She gave me my first Bible, which was a living Bible, and I'll never forget to this day. It sits in my office here, and she said in the Bible that no matter what happens in your life, God is there. You can talk to God. You can always pray, and you can always talk to God. And I was so angry at the time, frustrated. In a lot of ways, I blamed God, but then the real game changer happened for me. My mom, thank God for her. She knew that I needed more than football. She knew that I needed something to anchor my life. And so she asked me about going on a retreat with our youth group at our church. It was a small Presbyterian church in California. I didn't know a lot of the kids and never been to the youth group before. And she said, "Listen, I'd really like to see you go on this retreat with the youth group." And I said, "I can't. I don't want to do that." And she said, "No, you're going to go."
You're going to go.
I said, "No, I'm not." And the Saturday morning I was getting on the bus, as many of you out there know how moms can be.
Yeah.
She at the time was not only my mom, but she was my dad and my friend.
Right.
Because my dad got traded to the Philadelphia Eagles at that time, wasn't living in California. So I didn't see my dad for most of the year, talked to him very little. He was off doing his thing, playing football in Philadelphia. So long story short, we went to this retreat. I had 3 girls that I ended up going to high school with that could see that I wasn't doing okay. I did the best I could to hide it. But these 3 girls came up to me and we started talking. And for some reason, when you're around people that you've never met before, but they love Jesus and they show you the love of God, and they didn't care about who I was. I don't even know they knew who I was. And so they just talked to me straight about, listening to the pain that they could hear in my life and how unhappy that I was. And they knew I was searching, and I was. But God had a plan. And these three young ladies were bold with their faith. They were much like Pastor Graham was that night in 1969. And they just looked at me and they said, listen, we know, that you're in pain. We know that you're struggling. We know that some tough things have happened in your life, but there's only one person that can make it right for you, and that is Jesus Christ. And if people saw the movie Jesus Movement, I grew up in California during that time, during the right towards the end of the Jesus Movement. So these people I was with on this trip were all about one thing. Do you know Jesus, and is he your personal Savior and Lord?
Right.
And that was the last challenge. And I was a kid that liked to be challenged.
How old were you then? 13, you said?
I was 13.
Okay.
So, the only way that God was going to get me over the goal line was to challenge me, because I would have found any excuse not to walk that aisle, not to make a commitment to Jesus, because the enemy was speaking in my ear. You don't need that. You can wait on that. That's not a big deal. You're fine. Nobody needs to know that you're struggling. You know what you want to do with your life. And these girls saw right through it. They looked at me and said, listen, they grabbed me by the hands and they said, we'll listen to you all night, but the only thing that's going to change your life is the Lord Jesus Christ. Are you ready to pray and accept Jesus as your personal Savior and Lord? And it's one of the reasons why I became an evangelist and realized today how important it is to challenge people to make a decision about Jesus. Not necessarily yes or no, but make a decision. There are so many people dying today without Jesus, not because they didn't care about God or didn't hear the message. They just never were challenged to step up, have the courage and the faith to make the decision. And so I was faced with that many, many times.
Right.
And I'm talking to you out there. You may not know Jesus, but you can't say no to Jesus your whole life, because there'll come a point where God just lets you go your own way, where he lets you have what you want. And Jesus is, he's a gentleman. He's not going to force you to do anything. Jesus never forces anyone. We make that decision for ourselves, and he gives us that ability to say we either choose God in heaven or by osmosis, by not making a decision, we've chose hell. Right. So that day was very clear. I prayed that prayer after those girls that night. I still can tell you their names today. I cried like a baby, let go of years of frustration, years of shame, years of guilt. And it wasn't all my dad. A lot of it was just being so young at the time. And, as you said, my dad was my idol. And that's the truth. I looked up to him that way. I didn't see the imperfections. I only saw the things that I wanted to see. And in a lot of ways, he was that way too. He showed people what they wanted to see and what they wanted to hear. And by himself, he was a very unhappy person.
Roman, thank you. Listen, you said something about being an evangelist, and I really want to dial in on this because your story is phenomenal. And I want you viewers to know right now that we didn't rehearse any of this. Like I'm walking into a minefield of emotion in my own heart, in my own soul, and I'm watching a 62, 63-year-old man tell us the most vulnerable thing in his life. And I want to thank you for being willing to do that with these.
Listen, I always tell my story, just like everyone out there that's watching this show. You have your story.
I did not know that. I knew there was something. I just felt there was something there, and that's why I asked those questions. And I'm probing a little bit because I need help too with my emotions from a young man and where I'm moving. And listen, you sit here and you tell me, you looked at Billy Graham and you didn't say yes, but you heard it loud and clear, and it's seeping into your subconscious. A few years goes by, your father takes off, your mom's giving you Bibles, taking you on field trips, saying, "Get your stuff together, son. We got to get it on like Donkey Kong." And all of a sudden, 2, 3, 13-year-old girls come to you and say, "Roman, it's never going to be the way it needs to be. We can hear you all day. We can hear you talk all day, but my new friend, we all know that nothing's going to change in your life unless you simply ask Christ into your heart.
Well, the great result of that was I had always read my Bible that my mom had given me, but I really couldn't understand it. I mean, I read it and I knew, because of pastors and going to church. And again, I thank my mom because she made my brothers and I go to church. We had to sit there every Sunday. And if we wanted to watch football, which she knew was very important to me, I had to be in church no matter what. So I avoided it like the plague as much as I could, but she wouldn't let me do that. So she really put me in a position where I had to do business. And
Right.
But she was patient enough to realize that she couldn't do that for me, even though she wanted to. So after that experience, when I picked up that Living Bible, it came to life, which is what happens when the Spirit of God comes into your life. I began to understand what I was reading. I began to have the same desire to know Jesus that I did to play football. And that was a real crossroads because football was first in my life, family was second, and God came somewhere down here.
Mm-hmm.
But that day, God took his rightful place in my life. And then it was family. And then it was my passion for wanting to be a professional football player. And so what happened from that point on is that God was kind of asking me the same question that he asked all of us. I know that you have a passion for what you want to do because I gave you that desire and passion, but I'm not going to give you that opportunity to have that until I know that I'm first in your life. Are you willing to make that commitment? And are you willing to say goodbye to that dream if that's what I want? Are you willing to say, I'll do whatever you want me to do? And that was my desire at that time. And from that point on, God took me on a journey very much unlike my father's. He was the number one draft pick, in the NFL and the AFL. I had to prove myself at every level, which when I look at that experience today, coaches were very difficult on me because they knew who I was. And they did not want to be seen as giving me something, even if they weren't. So they went far the other way to make me work a lot harder to get to play than other players.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, other parents at that time were very jealous of who I was. So I had a lot of animosity. Pop Warner could be a lot tougher than the NFL. We had a lot of parents out there that wanted to see my brother and I break a leg.
Yeah.
It was pretty brutal, but it was a different world back then. I mean, but back then, unlike today, where words seemed to hurt people badly, back then, well, that was physical violence of football. So when I look at that, when I look back at that experience, it's still very painful. It will always be. But what God was preparing me for is how are you going to help the next generation of kids if you don't understand what they're going through?
Roman, let me set that up right now. So Roman takes us through all this, and this has been a phenomenal show. And I really, really want to spend some time, and I want to set because I know where he's going right now. God has created an evangelist out of Roman Gabriel from the beginning of Billy Graham to I think you even have ties with Franklin Graham now. I mean, you have some.
Yeah, we actually lived in Boone, North Carolina, for 10 years, and Pastor Franklin Graham and his wife went to the same church as us, so I had an opportunity to be around him and his family. But I'll tell you, it's kind of the ending to the Billy Graham piece because he is my spiritual heritage, and I'm an evangelist today because I saw the greatest evangelist of all time.
Yes.
But my wife and I went into full-time Christian ministry with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes back in 2003. God called us on an Abraham trip, and he said, listen, I know you've never been to Arkansas, but I'm calling you to be the regional director of FCA in Fayetteville, Arkansas, even though you've never been there before, even though you have a life here with your family and your kids and your mom and dad and family in Wilmington, North Carolina. I'm calling you out for a mission. And this is why we get back to Wired differently is, he called us into ministry, my wife and I knew that this was coming. She did not want this. She did not want to marry an evangelist who wanted to do that for a mission, but God got hold of her heart as well and said, listen, this is what we're calling both of you to. You're called to this as well. So we went off as God's mouthpiece and evangelist through a Christian sports ministry. But in 2006, Billy Graham was on his last crusade tour, and his last crusade visit was to Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City.
Wow.
And my wife and I got in the car with some friends, and we went to Arrowhead Stadium. And I want you to think about this for a second. When we walked through the tunnel at Arrowhead Stadium, it took me back to where I was 9 years old and how I felt when I walked through that tunnel that night. And when I walked through that tunnel that night, the difference was I was on God's team. When we walked into that stadium, I looked around, and again, just like that night at 9, it was full. It was absolutely full. There was an energy that you can't explain. And I began to get very emotional remembering that experience. And the cool thing about that night was that Pastor Graham was in a wheelchair. He was older. And that night, instead of a choir, third day was the act.
Oh, wow. Okay, great.
So, Pastor Graham, was changing with the times in terms of what he needed to do to get people's attention. But from that point on, when he was in that wheelchair, and he did the same thing that night for those 70,000 people that he did for me when I was 9, and he shared the love of Jesus. He didn't candy coat it. He didn't apologize for it. He didn't try to make excuses for the gospel. He just gave the gospel the way that he knew how to do it, and the only way he knew how to do it, and that was to take a simple biblical story and to tie in the gospel of Jesus Christ with that, and to meet people where they were at, wherever they were at that night. And he gave an invitation that night the same way that he did it when I was 9, and people flooded to the field. There were thousands of people who got saved that night. And Marcia and I, my wife, looked at each other, and I looked at her with tears in my eyes, and I just said, this is why I'm a Christian who I am today.
Yes, sir.
Because God expects all of us to share our story, our platform, through
preach it.
Pain, through our difficulty, through all the things that can take us to the lowest point. But you know what? Jesus went to the lowest point, and he didn't even have to for us. He was sinless, and he chose to go to the cross that day, not for himself, but for each and every one of us, and for many of us who would say no to him. He loved us before we loved ourselves. And while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And I'll never forget that day, thinking to myself, now that is a career. That is a platform. That has nothing to do with your chronological age. It has nothing to do with where you were 20 years ago. It's following God's path all the way to the end and finishing strong. And Billy Graham, when he died, people lined the streets all the way from his home in Asheville, all the way to Charlotte, where he was buried. And I'll never forget my wife and I watching that. It was like a president of the United States going home. And I'll never forget people standing with American flags, Bibles, praying as his car went by with his body. And I'll never forget saying, we only have a short time on this earth, and we're either going to make a difference or we're going to be ashamed of our life and look back and say, everything that God had for me, I wasn't willing to take. I wasn't willing to jump off the cliff. I wasn't willing to say, as Abraham said, I don't even know where you're asking me to go, but I'm telling my family right now we're going. And that's been one of the hallmarks of my wife and I's life. And that's where I give her a tremendous amount of credit. Is there have been many times in our marriage where things didn't go the right way. And when we went through a lot of difficult things together, a lot of painful things together. But my wife has had times where she would come to me and say, God's calling us to do this. And there have been 2 or 3 times in our ministry life where God has said, I know you have no understanding why I'm asking you to do this. I know you don't understand. I'm asking you to do something that normally would be crazy. Your family thinks it's crazy. Your friends think it's crazy. But I know it's not crazy. And are you willing to say yes? And what happens in life is when you say yes and you see God do miracles and you see God do great things in your life, and you look back on the faith that you talked about in Hebrews, about having that faith in God, regardless of whether you can see it or not. That's kind of where my wife and I are in our life. And that's one of the things that on my radio show and television show, the Roman Gabriel Show, it's all about faith, family, and sports. And I made a decision about 25 years ago that I got tired of talking about sports and talking about games and talking about those things 3 hours a day, 5 days a week on a call-in show, which was fun.
Mm-hmm.
God put it on my heart, when these Christian athletes began to share with me their story, like the story I've shared with you today. And these stories were compelling. These stories were things that most reporters wouldn't want to hear. But I decided a long time ago that I wanted to start telling the stories of guys that were difference makers, not in their talent on the field, but in how God used their platform from that field to change people's lives. And that's what Wired Differently is. I mean, you call it Wired Differently. I call it, when I walk up to people, having a platform. And let me just challenge everybody who's watching. All of us have a platform.
Well, you're challenging me this morning. You're challenging a lot of viewers out there. And I got to tell you, I've been physically and emotionally moved this morning on several of these stories. The Billy Graham thing is phenomenal. And I don't know who you are. If you're listening right now, if you're not moved by this man's story, his life, and his conviction, and I want to take this show out here because I really want to tell you, I think a lot of everything that Roman has told you today is put him in a position to change the world. And I know that, you look at it, he looks like an everyday dude. But he's convicted. And Hebrews 11:6 says, but without faith, it is impossible to please him. And we titled this show, Everything Begins with Faith. Everything starts with faith. And I did that before I knew this story. And I got to tell you, he just told us that without faith, he is nothing, right? Listen to this. We just went 50 minutes to hear the most beautiful story I think could ever be created for the moment. But here's what happens when he lands, right? Over the last 10 years, he's decided to crush a crisis. And this is where I meet Roman at the Super Bowl this year in February. And he invites me to become part of a movement, a ministry, a mindset, right? This is what we're talking about, sold out. Right. And so we're going to close this show here, but I need you to understand that Roman has to explain to you that this country is in a crisis. And it's not a crisis of what you're thinking about right now, like Israel and everything that's going on in Ukraine and all the. Listen, we have got a crisis right now of fentanyl. And it's not just with the people that are the bad guys, right? I'm telling you, the people I'm most concerned about are our children and the kids of this country. And it takes a man like Roman Gabriel to go through that story, right? Without faith, it is impossible to please him. This man has faith. God has landed him here with his wife of certainty, his wife of distance, right? His wife of overtime being blessed, and his beautiful mother casting these beautiful thoughts and prayers on him to create this beautiful man sitting here right now. So I want this direct from you right now, Roman. I want to understand what fentanyl is, and then I want you to riff on what you're doing to kick its ass right now. And thank you for inviting me to be in Sold Out.
Well, if you go back to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes back in 2003, I was impacted by the Fellowship of Christian Athletes when I was in college. It was a life-changing experience, and that's a different part of my story. But God directed my path. I thought it was for football. I thought, God, I want to play professional football. And he opened that gate for me through a lot of hard work. And I'll just say this, I have great love for my father, because all of the lessons that he taught me about life were taking football. And if you've ever had a passion for something in your life, it's really easy to take that passion and compare it to the Bible. So it was simple for me to take lifelong football principles, life principles that you apply from football to life, things like teamwork, working hard, staying off of drugs and alcohol, putting yourself in a position to be successful, surrounding yourself with good coaches, respecting your parents. And I took that and I applied all of those lessons that my father taught me, but I applied them through the eyes of the Bible. The only difference in the person I am today from the person I was when I was 13 is that I realized that God gives us our talents and abilities, passions, and direction in life. And once we understand that, then we open up the door for the great potential that God sees for us. And without that, then we can have the things we want, but they're an end to themselves. That's why so many people become unraveled with drugs and alcohol. So many people become unraveled with chasing their dream of their career. So many people come unraveled with so many different things in this world that can get our attention that aren't the main thing. So once the main thing's a part of your life, which is Jesus, then he has the opportunity to change you. And you don't change yourself. You come along kicking and screaming, because God says that he'll never leave nor forsake you, that he'll finish what he started in you. And sometimes that takes a lifetime. All you have to do is study the Bible. I mean, David wasn't perfect. Moses wasn't perfect. Paul wasn't perfect.
We know that verse, Hebrews 13:5. We talk about. So listen, we have a little bit of time here, so I want you to help me out here, because I really, we're driving here. I really want these listeners, because I'm involved in Sold Out. I had little knowledge of fentanyl. Give us some statistics.
Yeah, the number one killer, if you don't know it, and many of you probably don't know it, the number one killer in our country right now is not cancer. It's not car accidents. It's not suicide. The number one killer of 18 to 45-year-old people in our country today is the opioid fentanyl. Fentanyl is a safe product that used in dosaging in hospitals can help with severe pain for cancer patients and others where other drugs don't work anymore. But when fentanyl is introduced into recreational drugs, when it's introduced into pharmaceutical drugs that look exactly like what we get from the pharmacy, from anything from depression medicine to pain medicine to antidepressants, whatever it is. What's happening in our country right now is our border is wide open. And there are hundreds of thousands of pounds of this fentanyl coming over. And long story short, China sends the precursor for fentanyl over to Mexico. And in these labs, they're throwing this unlimited amount of deadly fentanyl. And if you took this pin right here and you put a grain of salt on there from the beach, a piece of sand, that would be enough fentanyl to kill Todd and I today.
Oh my God!
That's how powerful it is. It's 50 times more powerful than heroin. So what's happening in our country today is, yes, there are drug addicts who take fentanyl for the high and they push it to the limit until they lose consciousness. And the big thing about fentanyl is, as an opioid, is it slows your breathing down. You begin to lose consciousness, and you eventually die. Well, what's happening is that these cartels, these drug cartels on the border, are taking these pressed fentanyl pills and they're making it look like candy, putting it in Skittles boxes. They're taking vape and marijuana products, and what happens is the fentanyl through other drugs is sold to drug dealers, and the drug dealers don't even know how much fentanyl, or if any, is in the drug. So hundreds of thousands of these pills are being confiscated by the Border Patrol, but hundreds of thousands of others are getting through because of the mass of humanity coming through. The border right now is a dangerous place because it isn't just fentanyl that's killing over 100,000 people a year in our country, over 300 people a day, a plane load of people. But because China makes the precursor, China helps the cartels by funding them to get these things over the border, because the border's open. These illicit recreational drugs and pills are coming over that are laced with fentanyl, deadly fentanyl. So 7 out of 10 of those pills have enough fentanyl, have fentanyl in them, and then 45% of those pills can kill you. So what's happening in our schools today and with our kids and parents is many people don't realize on their cell phone, when they give that cell phone to their child when they're in 3rd or 4th grade, that as a safety item, hey, mom and dad, you get in trouble, you can call us if you're in trouble. But what they don't understand is that TikTok and Snapchat, and of course TikTok is owned by China, are selling and marketing these recreational drugs laced with fentanyl and these pharmaceutical pills that look just like the pills you get in a pharmacy to our kids through their cell phones. And to our parents, because you're looking at 18 to 45-year-olds, and it's the #1 killer of teenagers in our country. So as I go into schools with our fentanyl education program and our drug and alcohol abstinence program, what we're finding out is that kids are dying every day on our school campuses, junior high kids, middle school kids, high school kids, early college kids, parents.
The name of your organization is Sold Out. Is this
Sold Out Youth Foundation, but the name of this program is the Sold Out School Drug and Alcohol Education Program. So if you go to our platform, that's a 100% online curriculum and platform that's college accredited, that teaches school staff, parents, and students what fentanyl is, how to deal with fentanyl. And there's only one way to deal with a fentanyl overdose in our country today, and many people don't know that, but it's a nasal spray called naloxone, Narcan, which is an inhibitor that basically keeps the opioid fentanyl from killing you and stops the process and reverses it. It's a nasal spray, and it can be, you can find it in a pharmacy. You can go online and ask in your county where you can get Narcan naloxone, which is a simple nasal spray that you can keep in your car or in your home. Because listen, what's happening is that kids, parents, and others are dying for no reason. They don't know that the fentanyl's in the recreational drug or vape. Kids have been taught the last 5 years to go online and purchase vape. Well, what's happening now is they're purchasing vape and it's laced with fentanyl. And I'll give you one of the hundreds of stories that I hear in states all over our country, especially in border states. I had a mom, her name's Masa Yeager. Her daughter was a gymnast in Phoenix, Arizona, a senior in high school with her life ahead of her. Excellent gymnast, great student, beautiful young lady. She had a knee injury as a gymnast, and they gave her pain pills for that knee injury after post-surgery. She was talking to her friend on TikTok saw where those same little pills that she was taking for her pain could be purchased at a discount online on TikTok. Well, she purchased those fentanyl-laced pills that looked exactly like what she was taking from the pharmacy with the same name. She ordered those, and insidiously they were mailed to her home without her parents knowing. She paid with a credit card of her parents. Those drugs came to her. She went to bed one night. She took the first pill and she was dead in her bedroom the next morning when mom found her. Mom had no idea what had taken place. She had no idea what fentanyl was until she went to her daughter's phone and she saw the conversation texting with her friend about how she could get this pain pills on TikTok. And she since then joined 8 other families that lost their teenagers accidentally to fentanyl and are suing TikTok for selling these drugs and making these things available to our families and kids online. And unfortunately, most moms and dads don't know that's happening. So we have moms and dads dying the same way. Who are ordering, whether they be pharmaceutical pills or whether they be vape or whether it be marijuana or cocaine or whatever it is that they're ordering or they're getting. So this is coming unfettered into our country. It is every school district I go to are these sad stories that I'm told about dying students, about close calls, about parents dying. We even had a teacher in California at one of our districts that unfortunately forgot about the protocols. And mom and dad, this isn't just kids that do drugs. This is kids that experiment one time. So I'll tell you a quick story about my own life. When I was growing up in California, marijuana was a big deal. It was all over the place, but it wasn't like the marijuana today that's so powerful and potent. My friends were some of the biggest sellers of marijuana on the campus, and they were constantly, my teammates, talking to me about, why don't you smoke some marijuana with us? I'd say, no, I don't want to do that. And they badgered me to the point where I said, you know what? I'm going to try this one time. If I try it one time and I tell you I don't want to do it anymore, will you leave me alone? Because we're either friends or we're not. We're teammates. So I do it once. You're not going to ever ask me to do this again. They said, yeah. I did it once and I never did it again. But unfortunately, if that would have happened today, I could be dead today. I was a good kid. I was a good student. I was an excellent athlete. And these are the kids that are dying. Not drug addicts, not kids that are doing wrong things, kids who, like Todd and I, who grew up in a time where we felt like experimentation was our right. That's just can't happen anymore. If you're going to experiment, you have a very good chance of dying in our country today. But there's one other part of this that's so insidious. If Todd and I and my friends are sitting around as 13-year-olds and we're vaping, and that vape was purchased online from a place where kids think, hey, it's okay to buy it there. It's safe. I know where I'm getting it from. They tell me it's safe. Well, if I'm with Todd and I'm vaping and Todd touches my vape stick and it has any fentanyl on it at all, Todd gets to die because it goes through his skin to his bloodstream, and innocent kids can die being with their friends who are doing it. So the only way that we're going to stop this crisis is through a massive educational program, community by community. So if you go to soldouttv.com, which is our national platform, and you go to fentanyl education at the top of the page, you can get all the information that you need in red at the top. Parents, students, schools can learn everything they need to know about fentanyl, everything they need to know about what it is, everything they need to know about watching out for how it is presented to you and your children. And it has the result of how to, we even have a video on there on how to, there's discussion guides for parents. Dead on Arrival is a 7-minute video that if you watch that video in 7 minutes with your kids, you'll know everything you need to know about fentanyl. But we go another step further. What happens if someone or one of your sons or daughters brings a friend home who's having an opioid overdose that happens to be at your house? Or coach, you're with your Pop Warner team after, and one of your kids touches something on the ground that has fentanyl on it, and he goes into an opioid overdose on the field. Do you know what to do? Well, we have a video on that same page, several videos about how to use Narcan naloxone, what Narcan naloxone is, how to safely administer it. All your nurses at your schools know how to do that. But the problem is, many of you out there have had CPR, right? CPR training. Well, if you talk to CPR specialists and trainers, my wife and I just went to a CPR class a month and a half ago. They'll tell you that you need to administer Narcan naloxone first before you start CPR, because if it's an opioid-caused overdose and you start CPR, he could die from the opioid overdose far before you bring him back to life with a heart situation. So you can't afford to take the chance. So I have Narcan naloxone here in my office. My wife has it in her pocketbook. I have it in my car so that if I see someone who's having an opioid overdose, I was just with a rehabilitation prevention organization, private, that helps drug addicts, opioid drug addicts. She herself has brought 9 people back to life with Narcan naloxone simply by having it with her. Guys, listen, I come across people all the time who say, well, those drug addicts deserve it. Really? Does a drug addict who's doing marijuana or fentanyl or heroin or cocaine, or is hooked on cocaine or some sort of opioid, does he really deserve to die if it's laced with fentanyl? And that's a big no. Yes, we have drug addicts out there who abuse fentanyl. But what we're talking about here is innocent parents and kids, just because they're not educated and don't know what this is, who are dying daily for lack of education. What happens when we have lack of education? We have fear, stigma, and we have misinformation, and that is pervasive in our society right now. If I were to line up 10 of Todd's friends and ask them what fentanyl is, they couldn't tell me. If I were to line up and say, what's Narcan naloxone, they wouldn't be able to tell me. I have shocked parents who ask me what I do, and they're saying, this is going on in our kids' schools. This is going on in our county. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going on all over our country. There are senseless deaths happening every day. It's the number one crisis in our country. And that's why we're asking you to join us in this movement. We're asking you to keep yourself and your kids safe. We're asking you to go to soldouttv.com, to the fentanyl education page, and educate yourself so that you can take your phone, take that fentanyl education link, and text it to your friends across the street. Text it to your pastor. Text it to your youth pastor. And I'm talking to you churches too, the pastors out there. We created a faith-based program that is biblically based, that is backed by biblical scripture on fentanyl. Just because your kids are Christians doesn't mean that they won't make a mistake with drugs or alcohol. And I see a lot of churches closing their eyes to this and not taking this on. The church should be leading the way with this. I'm challenging you, leaders, overseers, pastors, priests. You need to talk to your sheep about this. You need to talk to your parents and youth pastors about this.
Keep bringing
We're glad to make it available for free to you. We'll send you the program at no charge. But the first thing you have to do is to stop pretending that this doesn't happen in a church home. It does.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to Roman Gabriel. This is an amazing man. He is an epidemic killer. He is an intellectual superhero and a friend of mine, and I'm proud to represent him in all that I do in Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Let's set our signatures and our heights to this type of level of commitment to our children.
And real quick, Todd, if you have a public school or private school and you want this fentanyl program in your public or private school, just get hold of us at soldouttv.com. Contact us on my email at soldout@gmail.com or call me at 910-431-6483, and we'll be glad to talk to your system to help you get this life-saving program in your schools. It's K through 12. We need to start early because you're starting early with your kids on this phone that, if they don't know, could be just as dangerous as a gun.
It's on like Donkey Kong. We're going to let it rip. Potato Chip, Abby and Chris and Chad and I, we love this man. We're representing him. We can get you there. We'll get your schools around. We want to help. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of it. Thank you for an amazing interview. Roman, you are truly spectacular. And thank you, God, for putting him on this earth and his evangelism, Billy Graham, the whole story. And let's save some kids here.
Thank you for being wired differently, brother. That's a great name for an organization because that's what it's all about. God wired us all differently, and nobody's better than anyone else. Everybody can make a difference every single day of their life with someone in their life.
I'll see you at the Super Bowl, Roman. Talk to you soon, brother. God bless you.
Thanks, God.